Sequester coming up, there's a lot of people going to get layoffs. For example, if you work for a defense contractor, defense spending is going to be cut significantly, you're going to get laid off. If you work for the government, there's a standard there that you have to give everybody 60 days notice before you release them.
Right.
That's the law.
We should remind people that sequestration is a result of members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, not able to come together to figure out how to cut our deficit. The super committee, remember, that's what they were charged with. They came up with nothing, and so these automatic cuts went into effect. Now, originally, they were so severe, especially for the Department of Defense, that, well, when they came up with the super committee rules, they figured, well, they'll come up with some sort of a decision because they'll never let these cuts go into effect.
So
that didn't happen.
So there's this law in the book. It's called the Warren Act that says if they're going to be big layoffs, you got to let people know 60 days out, which would, as it turns out, thanks to the calendar, it would be 4 days before the general election. Now, keep in mind, there are a number of swing states like North Carolina, also Virginia and Florida, with a heavy DOD employment record. Those swingers in those states, if they see all the layoffs, they'd think, not good. And they might vote their pocketbook and vote for the other person. But as it turns out now, according to the Labor Department, they've sent this out. They've said, you don't really have to warn them. They say to the employees of federal contractors, including in the defense industry, it is not required, the layoff notice, 60 days in advance of January 2, 2013.
And what's their theory? What's their theory? Because they
right
think
there. It would be inappropriate given the lack of certainty about how the budget cuts will be implemented and the possibility that the sequester will be avoided before January.
Right. But the theory is that they got to come up with some kind of deal, too.
Right.
Which is a huge stretch because
After
the
the
president
election.
basically has said, you guys are on your own. I gave you the super committee. Now go up and make a deal. Senator Inhofe's going to be on in a short while to talk about what the military would look like if these cuts went through.
Okay, so first I want to get to Senator Ayotte, who was on the show yesterday with you, Brian, saying that she thinks it's politics, and then maybe
gone to cut $500 billion over the next decade.
It makes me sick that some in Washington, particularly, some of the Senate Democrats want to play, and even our president, unfortunately, want to use our military as a bargaining chip.
Congress fails to act by the end of the year. Defense spending will be slashed by $500 billion over the next 10 years. Now, with so much at stake, many are wondering, why isn't the president taking any action? And what would this mean for our actual defense of the nation? Joining us right now, a man wondering the same thing, Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe. Senator, first off, you cut $500 billion off. How does that leave us militarily?
Well, if you stop and think about it, he's gone through 4 budget cycles so far, and each one has been a disarming of America. And if you take the $500 billion off that he's already projecting now, that's without Obama sequestration. Then you add another $500 billion from that. Even according to his own Secretary of Defense, Panetta, he said it would be devastating to the military. I mean, we would end up with the lowest ground force that we've had since 1940, lowest number of ships since 1915, lowest strike vehicles in the air of all times. I mean, people need to understand what he's already done and the effect it's going to have if he's successful in the Obama sequestration.
I want you to hear White House Press Secretary Jay Carney when it was asked of him what's going to happen with the cuts to the military. Listen.
We have a situation where defense cuts that the president believes are much too deep, that Republicans and Democrats believe are much too deep, as well as non-defense cuts. Republicans would allow those to go into place rather than ask millionaires and billionaires to pay a little bit more. That's unacceptable as far as this president's concerned.
So it's because you don't want to ask rich people to pay more? Is that the problem?
Well, they always want tax increases. That's what he's been talking about since he got in there. Keep in mind now, in his own budget, and people don't realize this, Brian, it's the president that designs the budget. If you add up all 4 of them, it's $5.3 trillion that he has proposed in his budget. Now we're looking at a 10-year period where he's trying to squeeze $1.2 trillion. Well, that didn't seem like it'd be a problem at all. This is his sequestration. It's not, as Jay Carney said, it's not Congress. This is Obama's sequestration. And you think about the jobs. I mean, Lockheed Martin is talking about the probability of 120,000 jobs that they would, that they're going to lose as a result of this. I am concerned about the jobs. I'm not as concerned about that as to what he's doing to America's ability to defend ourselves. That is the big issue.
Absolutely, especially as we try to tell Iran there's going to be ramifications to your actions in the Persian Gulf, and we tell China, we're going to be watching you. You're not going to dominate the region like we plan on having a greater presence in Asia. But I want to bring you to the WARN Act that says you have to give people 60 days notice before you lay them off. If we don't have a deal, these people need some notice. How does that gel with the
in the words of the Secretary of Defense, would have a devastating impact on our national security?
And Senator Ayotte, do you think that people don't understand this, or are we just so overwhelmed by the amount of news coming our way that we're just ignoring this?
Well, you know, I think there needs to be a wake-up call, not only across America, so that we're here to inform America. It means nearly 1 million jobs in the defense industrial base. But as Senator McCain has said, our Secretary of Defense has said essentially we'd be shooting ourselves in the head if we go forward in this, hollowing out our force, jeopardizing our national security. And I think there needs to be a wake-up call to Congress on both sides of the aisle. So not only do we want the American people to know what's at stake, but members of Congress have to get into action. And where's our president, our commander-in-chief on this important issue? He really has been absent, and we're calling on his leadership.
You know what he's essentially said, Senator McCain? Look, you guys did the super committee. I told you to get the deal done with the super committee, and this is what would happen if you didn't get a deal done. They didn't, so this is the fate. Is that essentially the message?
That seems to be the message. He made some comment about Congress have to wiggle out themselves. And look, we are in conversations with a number of other senators, including Senator Levin, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. But again, this is also what requires presidential leadership. No matter who or what was responsible, the President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. He's the only one. And if these impacts have the devastating effects that Secretary Panetta and all of our uniformed military leaders say, he should be in there. He should be talking with us. He should be leading. And he's MIA.